You're listening to Beyond the Classroom, going where history happens.
Perfect.
What have you done? You went to Dallas and you found a story.
Well, I was at the JFK Lancer Conference in Dallas.
Yeah.
And on the bill, one of the speakers I really didn't recognize. It was Monica Mercedes Pérez Jiménez.
It's a pretty awesome name.
There's a reason for it. We'll let her tell you a little bit later, but she is the daughter of Marita Lorentz. That's a name anybody connected with the Kennedy assassination knows, or clandestine America from back in the time of the 1960s. She had just spoken to an audience, a very attentive audience, to a riveting story, and when she was finished, I went and met her in the hallway. It was arranged so I could go meet her, just the two of us, and she agreed, and I noticed a couple of things about her while we were out negotiating what would become the recording session. She is very powerful. She's a very small, diminutive woman, but very powerful, very sure of herself.
Yeah.
And she was very emotional. I explained to her how I knew a little bit about her mom, Marita Lorentz. Fabian Escalante, the chief of security for Castro, has identified 634 different attempts, sponsored by, approved by, cultivated by some forces affiliated with the United States of America, of trying to kill Fidel Castro.
Unbelievable.
The CIA identifies approximately 24, and they are detailed now. You can find them online. CIA attempts to eliminate Castro. But one of those involved Marita Lorentz. She was a young kid in her late teens on a boat that had arrived from Europe. And Fidel Castro went down to greet the boat, to inspect the boat out of curiosity with his entourage. And somehow his eyes met Marita Lorentz's eyes. As Marita's daughter Monica says, my mother was 18, 19 years old. Castro was 32, 33 years old. But it was love at first sight, and so she became his mistress. Eventually, she would end up involved in a plot, one of those plots that we're talking about here, to kill Fidel Castro.
They're aware of this woman has this relationship with Fidel, and they got to turn her.
Correct. They knew she could walk in to his abode under the most extraordinary of circumstances. And so she went in there to kill Fidel Castro at one point. And better to have Monica tell the story.
Yeah.
Your mother's characteristics, and if you want to couch them in the context of yourself, how much are you like your mother? What was your mother really like? I don't know. So any light you could shed on that would be very much appreciated.
So one of the things throughout my life is growing up the daughter of an assassin and a dictator. I've always been prejudged, and it's been a very difficult road because of that. Throughout the years, as an actress and a stunt woman, I used my middle name. Because one day I used my last name, and a gentleman came to me in the gym, and he was like, "What's your last name?" I said, "Pérez Jiménez." He goes, "The dictator, that man killed my family." So after that, I use that name anymore, because my identity has always been questioned throughout the years because of Marita's not being able to prove that she had that child with Castro. So of course people assumed that I'm just another kid that she pumped out that she's saying is one of a dictator. So not until 2008 did I have DNA that actually proved my what do you call it? So I guess part of my body image is that I tattooed my DNA score right here on my arm. So my DNA score was 99.7%. And on the back, I actually tattooed my Venezuelan. It's a double helix back here. It's part of who I am. And so after my DNA, I went and did all of that. You know, all my tattoos mean things to me. I don't just put SpongeBob on there. But if the question was, how am I like my mother? Because Marita was taught to not have fear, and because Marita was brutalized, she didn't tolerate fear. She didn't tolerate weakness from me.
What are the circumstances of you say brutalized?
Marita was in Bergen-Belsen as a 5-year-old. By 7, she was raped. By 19, she was impregnated and lost a child, and then recruited by MK Ultra means to become an assassin. This all happened before she was 20 years old. The brutality of just using a child to do the work of the world is heinous to me, to say the least. At this, I still look at it as like, how could you have done that to my poor mother? So
I'm sure they didn't see her as a mother, that's for sure.
They didn't see her as a mother, but she was my mother.
To an end, yes.
Yeah.
You said she was recruited for MK Ultra. Do you know who did that?
Well, the MK Ultra was used on her. She was as to make her an assassin, and when they got back, her, you know, she was already vulnerable because she had lost a child, and her physicality was already at question. She was bleeding, she was hemorrhaging, she's already in a bad place. They took that vulnerable child. They hung a cross over her bed and told her that God was going to strike her down if she didn't take Fidel out, and she needed to do God's work. And they used God on her. They used drugs on her. They gave her drugs for during the day and drugs in the evening to function. So this, unfortunately, was a problem she had to deal with for the rest of her life, was because they hooked her on specific drugs, speed.
You and she both Roman Catholic?
No, Marita was not Roman Catholic. I was raised Catholic because I was always attended Catholic school. So she wanted me to have a very good education. That was one thing. She and my grandmother wanted me to have a very good education.
And where did your elementary and maybe middle school, high school education take place?
I attended St. Joseph's of Yorkville in New York City on the Upper East Side. And that was in New York. It's 1 to 8th grade. So I went there. And then after that, I attended Loyola High School in New York City, which I talked about because that is a high school I was sent to because of Alex Rourke, who was a major player here, and they groomed CIA agents. And so there was a constant battle in my house because my grandmother wanted to keep me out of this world, and my mom wanted to pull me in. And so it was a constant battle in between my two parental figures, which were 2 women in my world, because I never had my father or a father figure in my life. I wanted to go to the School of Performing Arts more than anything in New York City, and my mom refused. So it was a battle, and my mother won, and I got sent to Loyola. So
Loyola, Ignatius Loyola.
Yes, St. Ignatius
Roman
Loyola.
Catholic.
Yes, Jesuit Catholic.
Jesuit,
yeah.
Which is heavy.
Heavy, dude. Those guys Opus Dei. Okay, that's crazy stuff. That's the Jesuits are like the army of the Catholics. So, unfortunately, and I will share this with you because it will be public. Prior to my incident with Frank Sturgis at 15, my first year of high school in Loyola, I unfortunately was molested along with 10 other little girls throughout the 10 years by my history teacher in school. This was a trauma that I kept to myself because I couldn't share this with my mother or anybody else. I actually blocked it out of my brain. It didn't remember it until like about 2012, 13, when I just had, for some reason, I don't know what it was, I was drinking rum in Costa Rica, and I had a memory influx of what had happened to me. And I contacted the school. They opened up an investigation. The investigation showed that I opened this up and I'm very proud of it. I was one of 10 girls throughout a decade of being molested by the same teacher, and it was covered up by the Jesuits of Loyola. So I'm currently in litigation with them for that, and I've helped to change the laws in New York City to help protect children against these types of things. So that's another passion I have is to make sure that I can help provide laws to protect children from predators. So throughout my life, the traumas that I've led, being, dropped in the jungles, molested, watching my grandmother die in front of me and then having to shoot sturgeons, protect my mother, all of these, I've done a lot of research on the brain and how to get through trauma in natural realms. I was put on a lot of different medications, and I also dealt with my own drug issues to try to squash and make my world go away. And I realized escape is not the way to do it. True love of oneself is the way to find peace and happiness. So I'm very proud of the fact that I've used alternative methods, meditation, yoga, these types of things to heal me. And now I feel that I'm in my 60s, a healed place, a healthy place that I can absorb and now deal with this life that I've been given in this lifetime.
So you've dropped a couple of things here. I was dropped in the jungle. Could you elaborate on that? And you've also mentioned Frank Sturgis twice now. So
yes.
Let's go with the jungle first.
For sure. So Marita's involvement with all of this, after my father was expelled from the United States because he was in Miami, he was expelled by Robert Kennedy. And which is why they wanted Marita, because they thought Marita hated the Kennedys. She didn't. Okay. She didn't hate John. Nobody hated John. But yes, Robert threw my father out of the country. So there was,
as Attorney General,
right, and so there was no love for Robert. We all agree on that. But after this incident happened, after Marita went to Dallas, there were people that wanted my mother and myself to disappear. One of them was my father's henchman, Pedro Estrada. The other one was the lawyer, David W. Walters, who was the envoy to the Vatican, even. And then the Mrs. Pérez Jiménez. There were three people that wanted us gone, dead. And so somebody did make an attempt on Marita's life. I was with her. This is the reason she went to Dallas, because she needed protection. After she went to Dallas and did all of that, she came back. Marita was duped into thinking she was going to go visit my father in prison. And we were put on an airplane and dropped in the Amazon jungle. We were left for dead for 8 to 9 months, until my grandmother found us with the Red Cross. It's the Red Cross that found us.
Were you living off the land?
The Yanomami tribe came and embraced us. We were, remember, a woman and a child. And the only thing the pilot said was, whatever you do, do not smile. When you smile, it's like an animal. And when an animal shows its teeth, it's an aggressive form. A dog shows its teeth to you. It's not a smile. It's an aggressive act. Indians only know that. So when they see a smile, it's an act of aggression. It's not a pleasurable thing to Yanomami. And that was the one thing they told my mother when they forced us off the plane at gunpoint. And my mother even begged the pilot, leave me, take her, don't leave me with her. Don't leave my baby here. And the pilot, they refused.
And you were how old?
I was two and a half, 3, something like that. 2.5, about,
So you're dumped in the jungle to make it on your own. And you've used the pronoun they a couple of times. Mm-hmm. Who is moving you to the jungle, dropping you?
Like I said, it was probably more than likely the people surrounded by my father. So because of the exposure that the mistress and the baby brings to the family, and probably something to do with whatever her trip was. After her trip, they wanted. So I'm sure somehow, I don't know that connection yet. I'm still working on that, but somehow I know that my father's henchman, because I was told by my sister in Spain, my father's oldest daughter told me, father never would have had you. He would have destroyed you before you even existed. He never would have let you live and then try to drop you in the jungles. It was the people around him, which I believe that now.
Oh, I don't think we've told our listeners yet.
Yes.
Who's your father?
My father is my mother's second assignment, who was the president of Venezuela. And at the time he was, no longer the president, so they referred to him as the general. So he was General Marco Pérez Jiménez of Venezuela from 1952 to 58, actually one of the world's youngest presidents. So my father was known as a dictator, but I gotta say, at this point, the corruption level of my father might have been light compared to some of the things I'm even seeing nowadays. So my father was known for infrastructure of Venezuela. He's the roads, the buildings, all the main structures were done by my father. So be it that he was expelled due to corruption, he still is known in Venezuela by most as the president that did the best or the most for the infrastructure of Venezuela. It was the prime time of Venezuela when Venezuela was oil rich and more, we had the Miss Venezuela contest. So Venezuela was prime and was a very high end. Now it's so sad because I do live in Los Angeles, is that, Venezuelans are walking all over, just come over the border. And, it's so sad to see what's happened to the Venezuelan people, to the government there. But that's who my father was. And then when he was extradited, when I was a baby, I was never given a penny of his $600 million. Nobody would recognize me until I did DNA. But by that time, my father passed. So I never had I am a true dichotomy. I am now by blood a president's daughter, but I've never seen a dime or an ounce or any part of being a president's daughter.
None of a president's daughter's benefits.
Sure, nothing. Yeah. I've worked my entire life since I was a little girl. I've supported myself for a very long time. Marita and I, as much as I love my mother, she did have a lot of emotional issues after everything happened in Dallas. We both did. It was a very, very tumultuous time for both of us. And, we had to get through that time.
Should we move to the Dallas connection here? You've mentioned that a couple of times also.
Sure.
A trip to Dallas and involved on the periphery or otherwise with what everybody is here in Dallas for this week.
Right.
That is the Kennedy assassination.
Right. So Marita's involvement after my father's extradition, she felt in fear for her life. So she went back to her people, which was Frank Sturgis and the group that she worked with, the same group that trained her as an assassin for Fidel Castro, which is what her first mission was to, poison Fidel Castro.
Is that in Little Havana where she's living, or is that
No, that is in Cuba. She is in Cuba. Yeah, she is in Cuba. She goes back to Cuba to do that. And she failed her mission, obviously, and so they kept her on.
Let's talk about the specifics of the mission. I think people would be interested in that.
She was with my grandfather on the Berlin ocean liner, a German ocean liner, and they docked in Cuba, and Castro came aboard and he left his guns. She made him leave his guns down at the bottom, and that started their romance. He came on board. He brought his people. He was toward the ship. My grandfather welcomed him, and then he and Marita made a love connection.
His reason for visiting the ship?
He had never seen a more grand ship come into Cuban soil. And that was his reason for it. He wanted to see this beautiful ship from Germany. So he felt safe enough to go because it was a German ship.
Let me get this right then. In his eye, he catches your mother.
That's correct.
Love at first sight kind
at 18.
of thing.
She's 18 and he's in his 30s.
He's in his 30s.
I think he's 33.
Okay.
32, something like that. So, yeah. And this is what happened. And then she went back and he hailed for her to come back. And because my mother spoke a few languages, he wanted her to be his secretary or one of his secretaries, his translator. She went back to Cuba and they started their affair. And then that led to her pregnancy. Her pregnancy led to her losing a baby in her last term, in her 8th month. And then in the process of losing that baby, she had ordered a glass of milk that was poisoned or had sedative. She was knocked out. She woke up and she had no longer had the fetus in her body. Now, can a fetus be removed at that particular point in time? It can be. It can be if it's induced properly. So my research. So was the baby aborted? Truly don't think it was. I truly believe it. And this is from my mother's point of view, is that the baby was removed and kept there, was alive. And they refused to let the baby go because the baby would have been murdered as soon as it got to the United States. So that's the reasoning for keeping the child there. It was a child of Cuba. It's going to stay in Cuba.
And a rough time stamp for this is
It's
late
1959.
59. I was going to say late 50s, very late 50s.
Like 59. Everything happened in 59.
Castro had only been in power for a short time.
That's correct.
1st of January,
That's correct.
1959.
Yeah. So then Marita was sent back to the United States after the child was removed. They medically had to deal with her, and in the process of that, that's when she was enveloped. She became CIA chum, and they just went for her, and they brainwashed her with again, the details of what they did to my mother was horrifying to hear. The use of pictures of slaughtered infants, the use crying babies, constantly they recording of a crying baby for my mother. They had a crucifix above her bed and crucifixes around to remind her that she had to do God's work or God was going to punish her. So the manipulation of I think the manipulation is a horror story in itself. And to use a woman, it's a very specific woman. It's a very specific woman's thing I'm trying to point out here, because the manipulation they've done to men is one thing, but to what they've done to a woman using a child is heinous. And I've never heard in the whole world, I've never heard a story like my mother's, that this is what they've done to a woman.
And this was done in Cuba?
This was done in the United States.
This was done in the United States. How'd they get her away from Castro?
Whoever it was that they removed, Castro was not there. They removed her. One of Castro's people removed her. She was bleeding. They had to send her back to the United States. She was bleeding, and she's an American citizen. They wanted her out, because if she died there, that would have been, you imagine if she died there.
Fly on the wall in Fidel Castro's office when he finds out that his mistress.
Right. As far as I know, that was Fidel was furious. So as far that's what I told, he was furious.
He was prepared to have a child.
He was.
With your mother.
Right. And as far as I know, this boy is named Andre, and he became a pediatrician. This is what I've heard. I can't confirm any of that. All I can confirm is that her second child is definitely that of a dictator, because I got the DNA to prove it. So that was very important, because I want to legitimize my mother. I want to take her out of the realm of being a liar and this and that, and show the world, no, she was telling the truth. Look. And now it's becoming more and more of that.
So I've been to Cuba in 2009 when it wasn't legal for Americans to go to Cuba, except for two groups, medical and educational professionals. So I took a group of 38 people with me with permission from the State Department. And Castro was still alive at that time.
Yeah.
Hitting me, this is fantastic. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But it's fantastic what you're telling me.
It's important for kids to know this. It's important for everybody to know this.
It is. Everybody, you're right.
Everybody.
We visited a farm that had been a state farm under Castro's socialistic communistic system. It was 300 acres. There were 10 farmers working it, whatever. And when Castro was, when Castro came to power, he turned it into, I forget the proper terminology. We'll skip it over. But he gave the property to the people who'd been working it.
Right.
And we visited one of those farms. And the guy who was in charge of this estate told his people, I'll be back in a couple of weeks or, maybe a month or he's never gone back. And so I don't know how many, but countless people left Castro's Cuba and went to Little Havana, Miami.
That's correct.
Back in the day, Miami High School was called Havana High.
That's, of course.
Is it still?
I don't know, because, again, I only spent my early childhood in Miami. So after
my rambling is, but we'll get to you. Just
no worries.
My rambling is because, is that where your mother ended up when she came to the United States, when they took her away from Castro and
New York.
She went to New York.
Because my grandmother lived in New York. So they sent her back to New York. So our base was always been New York. So, but when my mother was with my father, and a lot of her dealings prior to my birth were in Miami. So she dealt with a lot of the Cuban, all her stuff a lot of that was in Miami. All the Dallas stuff, a lot of that happened before in Miami.
All right, in Miami is Havana?
Right.
It is.
Yeah. So that makes sense. But I personally don't know enough about that. I haven't been down there. And again, my connection with Miami is not anything. It's more New York.
I'll leave that alone then. I've spent considerable time in interviewing people.
Yeah.
For example, there. So I thought there might be a
No.
question I could explore here, but let it go.
Yeah, that I wish sorry.
No. So your mom is being taken care of medically in New York.
Yeah.
Has the child. From where do we go from there?
So at this point, when she's back in New York now, the CIA is working her. Now the CIA is doing this brainwashing, using the drugs, doing everything, and then they've managed to get her to a point where they send her back to Cuba to assassinate him. And when she's there, she's flying on all kinds of drugs.
And what did she say about that? What was the plan?
She was to go there. She had botulism toxin. She put them in a Hans cold cream thing because she got nervous at the airport because they were checking bags. So she wanted to put them in there, and she didn't want to use them anyway, but she wrapped them up with tissue, put them in the ponds. When she opened up the ponds, they were destroyed anyway. So then her option was to shoot him. She didn't shoot him. That's the big thing is you can't kill me. Nobody can kill me. And then they made love. And then that was it. She went downstairs. She was crying. They all thought she was crying. The CIA all thought she was crying because they thought she murdered him and he's upstairs dead. Meanwhile, she gets out and they hear him on the radio and she's with her guys. And she actually told me one of them turned around and whacked her in the head when they heard Fidel's voice, and she was with the group that was supposed because she failed the mission. One of them smacked her, like just immediately smacked her.
So she physically pulled a weapon.
Yeah.
But then she was told by...
No, she couldn't do it then. She pulled the weapon and she couldn't do it. And he told her to shoot her.
In Castro's presence.
In his bedroom. And he told her to shoot her. He said, shoot me. Go ahead, try it. And
Castro said to your mother, shoot me.
He goes, you can't kill me. Nobody can kill me. And she couldn't. She put the gun down. Boom,
and
done.
Made love.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. That's the last time she was with him. So this is Marita's story. This is legacy I've grown up with. And that was the first thing. After that, she failed her mission. She went back to Miami, and her second mission was to get funds. She was demoted. She was not an assassin anymore. Now she's got to collect funds, so she gets the funds, and then she meets my father. Things go, my father gets deported. Not deported, my father gets exiled, and then once he's exiled, then she's in fear of her life and my life. She goes back to her people, Frank Sturgis and those people for protection. They go, well, we need you for one more mission. We need you for optics for this mission. She goes back to Dallas a few days before. She leaves not knowing why she really was there, but she was sick of being there. Plus, they didn't want her there anymore, so then they sent her back. She went to Miami to get me when she was on the plane from Miami to go back to New York to my grandmother. That's when she heard that Kennedy was assassinated. So that's the timeline on all of that.
Was she a part of, in any way, the alleged plot to kill Kennedy in Miami on November 18, 4 days before?
No, she was not in any way, shape, or form. It's funny, we just listening outside again. Marita had no idea why she was in Dallas. She didn't know what they were there. She knew it was some sort of mission, but like she said, this mission was different because they brought guns. Usually they're taking guns, they're picking up guns.
So the logistical circumstances are she's in Miami and she's recruited, if you will.
Correct.
To be transported over here to Dallas.
Right, and so for her to drive with them to Dallas, which they did from Miami.
So she drove in a car.
For 2 days.
2 days.
2 cars, 2 days.
And she's in Dallas, has no idea why.
No, it's just for something that, and she'd been on a lot of these missions, so she didn't, the difference in this mission was they weren't allowed to speak Spanish, they weren't allowed to wear anything military looking. Everything was civilian looking and no Spanish was allowed. And so they kept everything very, they couldn't go to they kept it so it was very contained. And that her being there for a few days, plus Marita, physically was menstruating and she couldn't get what she needed for that as a woman. So now as a woman, she's like, yo, man, I need these things. And they're like, well, get out of here, take your period self and go back, because we don't want to deal with your woman issue. So Marita became a problem there. And then apparently Jack Ruby came to the door, saw her there, and
You know where Jack Ruby?
it's someplace here in Dallas, in some hotel out.
Not sure where.
Not sure
Not
where.
his club.
No. Some hotel in Dallas.
Okay. A rough timestamp of this. Again,
This is a few days before the assassination.
few days before John Kennedy's assassination,
Correct. And
November 22nd.
yeah. And before that, Marita was here, and then she was here for like 2 days, and then she left because she was sent back. So they sent her back, and then, like I said, on the airplane, she heard that the president was assassinated.
I usually don't like to speculate like this, but I'm going to ask you to. Do you suspect she was possibly here to be charged with the murder of President Kennedy?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not think. I think that Frank thought that for optics purposes, if a woman is with a bunch of guys, it doesn't look as threatening. So just, at this point, they were so, over Marita because she failed the Fidel thing. So no, I don't think they would have trusted her to do anything like that. But she was used. So if she was used, who else was used? Who else was used in this plot to take away our American president? Who? And so now the question to me, and what I now want to know is, besides my mother, I lost my grandmother, my dear grandmother, who was poisoned because of this. My grandmother was poisoned because years later, Frank Sturgis was implicated. He's a Watergate burglar.
He is, yeah, a.k.a. Frank Fiorini. Right.
Mm-hmm. So he was implicated. So then he started to open his mouth in the public arena, and he implicated himself. He also implicated my mother. So then my mother was called to testify for the House Assassination Committee. Once that happened, Frank wanted her to change her testimony, and he knew this was coming down the pike. So what did he do is, because my grandmother knew everything that my mom knew and then some, including Alex Rourke. My grandmother was given an injection, and the injection was of an unknown paralysis because she died of an unknown paralysis. And so, unfortunately, I watched this process with her body, and it was heartbreaking to watch her get trapped in her own body and not be able to speak, not be able to move, to the point where she died in front of me and she shut down. But while she was dying, while she still had voice, she would say, "It's the shot. The shot did this to me. The shot," and she knew it. And she knew it. And I knew it, but I don't think my mom wanted to know it. I think it was too painful for my mother.
When did your grandmother die?
She died November 7th, 1977, a few days after I was arrested on October 31st, 1977.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned Alex Rourke. I can later on explain to people who that guy is, or you can.
I can't actually, because I don't know as much about him as people think I do. I only know that his name always appeared in my world, and he was a friend of my grandmother's. My grandmother knew him, and my grandmother wrote this article that Castro raped my daughter. There was an article that was done because they wanted to turn people against Castro. So my grandmother and Alex Rourke wrote this controversial piece that's out, old piece from some magazine. Why that happened, I don't know, but Alex Rourke was special to my grandmother for some reason, and my mom. So when he disappeared, it was a problem, and I know they tried to look for him, but I don't know as much about him other than I was sent to this school because they wanted me to, because Alex went there and he was such an amazing man. So I can't really tell you too much about Alex Rourke.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I wish I could more.
I have a little connection to Alex Rourke because I know a woman named Sherry Sullivan.
Yes, Sherry.
I met her here. And
I met Sherry too when I was a kid.
I've had her in my classroom in Vermont a couple of times, speaking to my students about her father's disappearance in Connecticut. He said goodbye to his family, went to work like he usually did.
And that was it.
Flew down near Miami, not Miami, but I don't know, maybe Opelika, someplace. And he's never come home. And she's been looking for him. Yeah. She went even to Cuba.
She went to Marita too.
And yes, she did. She went to Marita.
Yep. And I remember her and Marita looking at pictures on the table. I remember her
Sherry,
as a kid.
Sherry will be
Probably remembers me too.
Sherry will be enamored with this part of the conversation.
Well, you send my love to Sherry
I will.
because
You've met-
I tell her I remember her. I do, and I know Marita wanted to help her. I do know that Marita did want to help her, and because Marita wanted to find Rourke, they wanted to find Sullivan because Sullivan was with Rourke. So I know
Jeffrey Sullivan we're talking about. Sherry Sullivan.
Yes, yeah, and so that's why I know that Sherry came. I remember Sherry. She had curly, dark hair.
Yes.
And so I remember her. Yeah. So please, yes. See, again, this is a small world, and I remember this all happened to me when I was a kid. So as a kid, these people are coming to my world, and so
Yeah, roughly when were you born?
1962. So I was
62.
So I was 15 when everything occurred. I'm 61 right now. So yeah,
Okay.
and I have a 32-year-old son, and my son is with the grandson of Orlando Letelier. So I have bridged history with my son. My son has bridged this amazing history. It's one of my proudest things because I took the dictator and I took Orlando Letelier and I fused them. I fused this history of polar opposites and I made a kid.
Yeah. Incredible. You're getting dinged. You need to go, or are you?
No. That's fine. I'm here with you. It's my son actually sending me an image of where he is, and I'll share that with you because he is right now in Chile.
Look at that.
Yep.
Yeah. He's high in the Andes.
He's at Patagonia.
Okay.
Yeah, he's down there. This is beautiful. So my son is, and he's visiting his grandmother, Isabel Letelier, and his uncle is a senator in Chile. So, yeah.
Let me ask you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
my wife's question for
Yes.
you out there. She's wondering, have you felt nervous? Do you feel compromised? Do you feel threatened? Do you feel a pall over you as you travel around now? That somebody would snatch you up or do something to you?
Quite the contrary. I feel empowered. I feel ready. Been through so much in my life that my fear factor is to a level where I'm ready to take on this new journey in my life. I do not fear anything any longer. I fear nothing any longer. I did as a child. We had attempts. I was once sitting doing homework, and we were in Connecticut, and Marita had been in the press, and I was doing my homework, and I had Marita's jacket on. And I was facing doing homework with my jacket.
Do you look enough like her? So if I take that picture I took of you yesterday, people might say,
No, but the time my hair was the same color as Marita's. So I now, no, but I was facing this way. My hair was brown. Her hair was brown. So, and somebody, and again, maybe they knew it was me, but they shot through the window. And so I just went to the ground. I know I had got a little scrape from a piece of glass. That, when that happened, don't know. We called the police. We have no idea what happened.
never resolved.
Never resolved. After that, I was a little bit paranoid, but then I tried to distance myself as much as possible from all of this. As a kid, I used my middle name. So.
Or that's disconcerting enough right there.
Right. But at this point,
falsify your identity.
At this point, I don't have fear because what I'm saying, other people are saying, and my mother's passed away, my grandmother's passed away, and I don't feel. What would you want to do to me? For what reason? There's nothing. I pride myself on the fact that my existence is non-dramatic. I choose love. I choose harmony. I choose love. I choose the light. I'm on the good foot. I don't take any medications. I don't take any antidepressants. Not that there's a problem with that, but I pride myself because I've had to go through all of these drugs. I had to get past that. And I did. And I found the way to do it. And the way that worked for me was alternative medicines, acupuncture, meditation, CBD, CBG, CBN. I do a lot of research in those realms to keep the mind healthy and to keep depression and PTSD at a level, because I've gone to therapy. I've had therapy throughout my life. I'm a big believer in therapy. I was diagnosed with not depression, but chronic PTSD due to my lifestyle, due to reading about myself constantly. I have Google alerts on my phone every single day, Bob. Every single day, Bill. It's either my mom, my father, Orlando, or myself. Every single day of my life, I read something about my family. And at this point, I can't be fearful. I already spent enough time doing that. Been there, done that. I'm 61. I don't have the luxury of this fear anymore. I need to get out there, and I need to get out there because I don't have time on my side. I'm to go now and do. So that's my age right now is really probably one of my biggest propulsion systems.
Asset, yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask, how did you end up? How did you end up getting here? Did you contact Lancer? Did they find you, or?
My man, Doug Campbell.
Okay.
I did an interview with him. He talked to me because we got in touch with each other. I got in touch with him, and we spoke about Marita had me on the podcast. One thing led to another, and then I was invited here, and I'm ever so grateful because I feel like I found a tribe.
That's great. Yeah, you have.
I do, yes.
You have, and this will help.
Yes.
I'm sure.
I'm really happy to do this because it's really important I'm so happy to see a younger generation here, Alex and Johnny and these guys. And it's really important because they're going to carry this message through. You know, Johnny brought me to tears yesterday because I'm like, dude, you have to keep going on this. I'm going to be gone. You're going to be here. You need to speak for my mama. You need to speak for my grandmother. You need to speak for me because when I'm gone, it's all up to you. And
Can I make a personal observation? I don't think you're going anytime soon.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wondered, what was I thinking here? You had said something along the way. Oh, yesterday,
yes,
when I spoke with you, you said you'd heard your mother's voice so many times. Who's been playing your mother's voice in recordings that you want to hear it again? You were too upset.
So,
because I have digital audio files of your mother in the same room during the same session with Frank Sturgis. So
yeah,
I guess I thought that might impress you. But
no, I am impressed and I would like to hear them. But you have to understand in doing this in the past week or so, or even longer than that, past few weeks, I've been having to watch numerous videos of my mom and her voice and her presence, and she's dead. She's gone, and I miss her, and I love her, and it's hard. It's been hard. It's just been hard to see my dead mom, and I just miss my mama, and I wish she was here. So
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I try not to do this. I just miss her, and I wish she was here with me. So
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay because it's important because, she is here with me. Taking her spirit and the spirit of my grandmother, and they're living now. Their existence meant something, and their lives meant something, and I'm going to make sure that it does. So I have to get over this. I have to stop doing this because this is the first time I've done this. I've really tried to I know she's passed away, but I've not had to hear her voice and see her so many times as I have in the past few weeks. So even last night when I was watching her, it was painful because I keep feeling like she's here with me, and she's not. So,
but she is.
She is. What's interesting?
Through you,
she is. What's interesting is her last name is Lorentz. We're in the Lorenzo Hotel, but the day before I left, I believe my grandmother, my mother, and myself I've always had a certain psychic ability. And so actually Marita, offshoot once, Marita actually helped solve an FBI case because she kept drawing and seeing these guns in a closet. So she kept drawing them. She brought them to the FBI. They helped solve a famous case of two cop killers called P. Argentini and Jones in New York City. And Marita received FBI citation for psychic ability. So nobody knows that. I know that. And my grandmother also had this thing. One of the things I'm going to throw out there, really to go down the rabbit hole, is my grandmother. I don't know if you've seen the footage about JFK and UFO and the UFOs, and how JFK was about to work with the Russians on exposing our UFO phenomenon to the public.
Is that the stuff exposed by the researcher and author Jim Mars?
Might be, but it's something that I think my grandmother might have known something about, because she was very into that. My grandmother was brilliant when it comes to certain things. So I often wonder about that, because she would talk to me about, anybody thinks that there's not life on other planets, that's ridiculous. And, she would, so, I've heard that and I've wondered about that, but I'm again here and in there. The one thing I wanted to say back to psychic ability is, before I left, I prayed, did everything I could to contact both of my grandmother and my mom. And I was looking out, and as I was asking for this, there was a crow here, and then there was another crow in another tree. And I said, if this is you, I need you guys to come together and talk to me. And as I did that, one crow moved over here, one crow moved over here. And I said, I need you to come together. One crow moved over here, one crow moved over here. And I spoke to both of them, and they stayed there until I finished speaking. And so I feel that, to go down another rabbit hole, something happened to me in the jungles, and something happened to us as a family, or that allows us to have a communication level that somehow might be a little different. And I feel now, due to all this trauma, due to how my brain has been rewired, that it allows me to have an extreme empathic level for people. I feel everybody. I stand next to somebody in pain, I feel that pain. I have the empathic thing that's opened up within me is almost too much to handle sometimes. So I have to shut that down, because I feel everything. And is that a gift? It is now.
Gift and a curse.
And a curse.
At the same time.
It's, yes.
You're the double-edged sword, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
15 years ago, I'd have laughed at what you were saying right now, but I had a student, an adult student, a very bright woman, Johns Hopkins University graduate. We were doing a course called the Indian West, and we were at a battle site where the Nez Perce Indians were destroyed by the United States Cavalry. And she was doing a project in the open air about those kinds of things. And she was able to identify which creature in that environment matched the personalities of the people.
Yes.
And as she was doing that, exactly what you just said, flew by. And it was like, it's not a joke. Man.
No, it's not. And I don't, at this point, I give zeros about, I don't care what people think about me. I know that I live a sweet, my heart is open and pure and loving. And I'm not, I don't kill things, I save things. And that's who I am. And yeah, I feel blessed to have been able to have been a part of history in many ways. And
you'll continue to be so also.
Would like to be. I would
You're
like
part of this puzzle.
Yeah.
Major part, I would say.
I don't feel that, but I feel that at least my tribe I found, and I feel like I don't feel like, you have to understand, growing up like this too, I've always felt like I've never belonged. I've always felt different. I've always been an outsider. I've always felt that. I've never felt ever that I belonged. And because of who my parents were, I always felt like I was a damaged piece of goods here on this planet. And it took a lot of therapy. It took a lot of love. It took a lot of learning self-love to change that. And a lot of therapy, a lot of practicing and listening to wonderful people. Like there's a man, Michael Beckwith, I listen to, and he's a Black reverend, not a religious reverend, but a spiritual reverend. And somebody that I admire and I listen to. I'm not religious any longer. I am a spiritual person though, and I pride myself on that, because why I'm sitting here in front of you is because Marita chose love over death. That's the only reason I'm sitting here. I got to carry that sword. I've got to.
You're doing it very well.
Thank you.
What do you think? Are we okay? Did we miss something?
I don't think so. I think we got it all.
You've been listening to Beyond the Classroom. We'll see you next time.